Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today, we're diving into 5 real-life true crime cases, each grabbing the attention of the public and media. While investigating these 5 cases, detectives faced challenges. However, evidence, witness statements, and in some cases, surveillance footage ultimately helped uncover the truth. Many of us have come home late at night at least once in our lives, alone. Of course, at such a moment, many feel anxiety and some fear. But at the same time, each of us thinks that something bad is happening somewhere far away, to someone else. But I'm definitely going to be fine. Would you agree that that's what most people think? On January 16, 2019, 21-year-old Aya Masarwe got off a tram in the Australian city of Melbourne around midnight. Surveillance cameras located nearby captured her walking down the street, and it seemed that nothing foreshadowed trouble. It took about 1.5 miles to walk from the tram stop to her apartment. On the way home, she called her sister because it gave her a sense of security. But after 5 minutes, Aya's sister heard her eerie scream and a sound similar to the sound of a falling phone. Then, she heard the sounds of cars passing by. Aya never returned to her phone, and it wasn't until the next morning that it became known what had happened to her. To understand how Aya ended up on that night street in Melbourne, we need to get to know her life better. Aya was born in 1997 in Israel. She was one of 4 daughters of her parents. Since early childhood, she stood out among her peers with her intelligence. She was fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, and Chinese. She studied at Shanghai University in China, where she studied business. Her father ran a business in China, and Aya planned to work for his company after she graduated. In August 2018, she arrived in Melbourne on an exchange program to study at La Trobe University. She chose a business line to complement the knowledge she had already gained at Shanghai University. In addition, she saw Australia as a place where she could improve her English language skills. She quickly got used to the rhythm of life in a new city. Having settled near the campus, she got acquainted with Australian culture, attended lectures, and made new friends. It seemed that everything was going on as usual. She had a lot of plans for life. But, unfortunately, all these plans collapsed on January 15, 2019. That day started as usual for Aya. She attended lectures, met with friends, and planned to attend a comedy show at the Factory Theatre in the city center for the evening. She was a cheerful young woman and loved humor, so she saw attending the show as a great opportunity to relax after a day of study at the university. The show started around 9 o'clock in the evening and lasted about 2 hours. In a good mood, Aya went outside and went to the nearest tram stop. The tram ride was unremarkable, just a journey home through Melbourne at night after an eventful day. As I said, around midnight, Aya got off the tram and immediately dialed the number of her sister Ruba, who lived in Israel. She wanted to talk to her as she walked to her apartment. They chatted about the show, about the plans for tomorrow, and they always had something to discuss. Aya was joking and in a great mood, but after about 5 minutes, Ruba heard Aya screaming and cursing at someone, demanding to get her hands off her. Ruba heard the sound of the phone falling, then the sounds of banging, and then silence and only the sounds of cars passing by. It's terrible. I mean, can you imagine what Ruba was going through at that moment? She just heard someone attacking her sister, and it's just a heartbreaking moment, isn't it? But it's also scary in this situation that Aya was on another continent, in a city where she doesn't have any family members around who are ready to rush to help and take any action at the same second. Ruba experienced a real horror, and she later described that moment as the scariest in her life. She was calling her sister's name and shouting into the phone, but she couldn't hear Aya's voice anymore. She dropped the call and started calling back, but Aya wasn't answering. Being in a state of shock, Ruba contacted other family members because she was confused and did not know what to do. Her parents and sisters started calling and texting Aya through various apps, but there was no response. Eventually, the family contacted the Australian police. By that time, it was about 6 a.m. in Melbourne. About an hour later, a bystander who was on his way to work that morning noticed something unusual in the bushes near the mall. He decided to get closer and hoped that it would not be what it seemed from the outside. But unfortunately, it really was the body of a young woman, partially naked and burned, with obvious injuries. The body was lying just a few minutes' walk from the tram stop where Aya got off the night before and about a mile from her apartment. A passerby immediately contacted the police. The police officers who arrived at the scene cordoned off the crime scene, and it was clear from the first glance at the body that it was a crime. Various items were scattered around him, including a bag, AirPods headphones, and other items that later became key evidence. There were serious injuries on the victim's head and signs of an arson attempt on his body. Apparently, the perpetrator tried to destroy the evidence with the help of fire, but the fire did not spread much. The victim's identity was quickly established, and documents in the name of Aya Masarwe were found with her. Her family, who were already in a panic after the strange call, received the worst possible news from the Australian authorities. Aya's father, Syed Masarwe, later flew to Melbourne to identify his daughter's body. He later said that this moment broke his heart forever. Such a violent incident with an international student immediately attracted the attention of the media. Police held a press conference where the detective called the attack horrific and cowardly. At the same time, the police believed from the very beginning that the attack on Aya was most likely an accidental act, and not a planned one. Newspaper headlines and television reports spoke of a shocking attack on a student in Melbourne, causing a wave of fear and anger in society. This made a special impression on the students of the university where Aya studied. Female students were afraid to walk alone in the evenings, and the campus increased security measures. The attack on Aya took place in a quiet suburb where such crimes were not common. On the contrary, it was a low-crime area, and such a crime seemed unthinkable. On the evening of January 17th, hundreds of people gathered in the center of Melbourne to light candles and honor Aya's memory. These actions lasted for several days, and people left flowers and notes at the crime scene. Similar events were held in Israel, Aya's home country. The family and the public demanded answers, and the police did everything possible to find the person responsible for this terrible crime. A special group of detectives was formed, who worked around the clock to collect all possible evidence. It was important for them not to miss a single detail, because it could ultimately affect the outcome of the case. It is not unusual for the police not to disclose the details of the investigation to the public, and only after a while can we find out how events unfolded and what evidence was found. This case was no exception. Only later did it become known that during the inspection of the crime scene, criminologists found a lot of key evidence: a metal pipe, presumably used as a weapon, with traces of blood, a t-shirt, which also had blood on it, a discarded baseball cap, a cigarette butt, and other items that could belong to the criminal. All these clues were sent to the laboratory. During the analysis, the experts were able to extract DNA profiles, but now it was necessary to find out who they belonged to. But that's not all. There were signs of a struggle, and her torn clothes on the ground where Aya's body was found. She desperately resisted, as a result of which there were pieces of the criminal's skin under her nails, which also became an important clue. I mentioned earlier, but I remind you that the perpetrator tried to set fire to the body, but the fire could not spread much, and this allowed many clues to be preserved. At the same time, detectives were searching for digital evidence such as CCTV footage. Cameras at and near the tram stop allowed police to see Aya get off the tram around midnight. On recordings from other cameras, investigators saw a suspicious man. He was wandering around, and on his head was a baseball cap, similar to the one that was found near the body. The man seemed to be wandering aimlessly down the street until, by some terrible chance, he saw Aya. I want to ask you, do you believe in the existence of fate at such moments? I mean, if Aya had gone down a different street, or the tram had been delayed for at least a few minutes, then everything could have turned out differently, right? What do you think about this? I would be interested to know your opinion, and you can share it in the comments. When the forensic experts performed the autopsy, the investigators had a clearer understanding of what had happened. The autopsy results confirmed the brutality of the attack. Experts called the official cause of death multiple head injuries from blunt force trauma, the same pipe that was found at the crime scene. Aya was hit at least 4 times on the head and face with a metal pipe. The injuries were so severe that death occurred quickly, presumably within a few minutes. Besides, the autopsy confirmed what the detectives had already guessed. Aya's torn clothes and the fact that she was partially naked indicated a motive for this crime. Before I say this, I want to apologize for using such language, but there are certain rules on YouTube. So, experts have established that during or immediately after the attack, there was contact between Aya and the perpetrator against her will. This was indicated by characteristic injuries and DNA traces in intimate areas. Also, during the forensic medical examination, it was established that the fire was not the cause of death. It was an attempt to destroy evidence. In the course of the ongoing investigation and attempts to identify the monster that freely roams the streets, detectives interviewed many witnesses. They started with Aya's friends, questioned university students, residents of the area, and even passengers on the tram in which Aya was traveling. None of them knew who might want to harm Aya, and no one saw the attack itself. This confirmed the police's theory that Aya could have been an accidental victim. Digital technology experts checked her phone and ruled out personal motives. All the evidence pointed to one person unknown so far. DNA from the cigarette butt, t-shirt, and baseball cap matched samples from the body. The investigation progressed rapidly, and 2 days after the discovery of the body, the police arrested the suspect. On January 18, 2019, detectives arrested 20-year-old Cody Herman. The arrest took place in the park, where Herman was sitting quietly in the barbecue area, unaware that handcuffs would be put on his wrists in a minute. He did not resist arrest. It can be said that Herman's arrest was the culmination of continuous police work for 2 days. DNA samples were taken from him at the police station, which matched DNA samples from a cigarette butt, baseball cap, other evidence, and DNA samples found on Aya's body. In addition, surveillance footage showed Herman wandering in the area on the night of the attack on Aya. However, during the interrogation, he denied his involvement in this crime. On January 19, 2019, Herman was formally charged. During the presentation of the charges in court, he did not show emotion and remained silent all the time. Given the gravity of what he had done, the judge decided to keep him in custody without the right to bail. For the Masarwe family, this arrest was a small, but still a relief in the grief that had befallen them. Aya's father, Saeed, thanked the police for quickly finding the perpetrator, but stressed that nothing would bring his daughter back. Now let's try to figure out who Cody Herman is and whether there was any connection between him and Aya. In this case, who he was is important, because during the trial, his lawyers will use his past as a mitigating circumstance. Herman entered the world in 1998 to parents who belonged to the Aboriginal community and struggled financially in North Melbourne. The community where his family resided faced numerous social issues. The situation at home became even more unbearable than the neighborhood problems. His father struggled with alcoholism while dealing with mental health issues. The family experienced complete destruction whenever his drinking episodes occurred because they happened frequently. The father frequently abused his wife and son through physical attacks, which caused both physical wounds and emotional trauma. Cody Herman periodically moved out of his mother's care due to her alcohol and substance abuse, and therefore spent some time in foster care. From an early age, he suffered from mental problems, but did not have constant access to medical care. In 2016, he last sought help from the Health Service for mental health problems. By that time, he had already started using alcohol, illegal substances, and often spent the night on the street or in abandoned buildings. Despite all the difficulties, he tried to find a way out of the difficulties of life through creativity, and dreamed of becoming a rap artist. Under the pseudonym MC Codez, he recorded tracks and shared them on social media. His music was a reflection of his inner world. The lyrics are full of anger, pain from a difficult childhood, searching for himself in this cruel world. At the time of his arrest, he did not have a permanent job. His criminal history included minor offenses related to hooliganism in his youth, but there was nothing like what he did to Aya. However, rage was boiling inside him. Psychologists who examined him after his arrest noted that his impulsivity and lack of control over emotions were the result of unresolved traumas from the past. I want to emphasize that these details do not justify his actions, but only explain how a man with such a past could have come to such a terrible crime. The police found no evidence that Herman was acquainted with Aya. There were no personal contacts between them, nor digital traces linking them. They didn't know each other, and that's a fact. But what's strange is that the police found out that Herman had tried to get into her apartment complex twice in the 6 weeks before the crime. He tried to enter the apartment complex and told the students that he had lost the key. It was a lie. He did not live there, and at that time had no permanent place of residence. He returned a few days later and was seen standing on the grass outside the building. Forensic psychiatrists described him as a man with low intelligence and weak self-regulation. But importantly, they found no signs of psychosis in him, noting that he understood what he was doing. The attack on Aya, specifically on her, I want to emphasize this, was not planned. He just saw an opportunity to attack her, and, unfortunately, she had no chance to escape. She was an accidental victim, but whether the crime itself was impulsive was the next question. Let's try to figure this out. Herman claimed that he could not remember where he got the metal pipe, or the means with which he poured over the body and set it on fire after the attack. This aspect of the case was extremely important because it had to determine whether the crime was premeditated or not. Police obtained surveillance footage showing Herman loitering around the mall shortly before the attack, and he was not holding an object that looked like a metal pipe. But still, investigators noted that there was some element of premeditation in this crime, and it consisted in the fact that Herman launched the attack with a pipe in his hand. This means that he did not pick up the pipe somewhere on the ground during the fight against Aya. When he approached her, there was already a pipe in his hand. He used her to quickly knock Aya unconscious so that she wouldn't have a chance to defend herself, try to escape, or call for help. Even so, police concluded there was no clear evidence of premeditation in the classic sense. The attack was described as unsophisticated and opportunistic, with little sign of planning. Detectives found no evidence that Herman had prepared or concealed the pipe in advance with the intent to use it in the commission of a crime. With plenty of evidence, forensic results, and witness statements, investigators were able to piece together the timeline of that night. Aya had just stepped off the tram. The time was 12:12 a.m. A few streetlights dimly lit the road she walked. Around her were bushes, the parking lot of a shopping mall, and quiet apartment buildings. She often took this path alone, never imagining the danger ahead. She was still on the phone with her sister when Herman came up behind her with a metal pipe in his hand and, without saying a word, struck her 4 times in the head. her sister heard Aya's scream through the line. Aya didn't give up easily. She turned, scratched, even cursed at Herman in Arabic, fighting back as best she could. But the head injuries were devastating. She collapsed, unconscious. Herman dragged her behind a low hedge near the parking lot. He tore at her clothes, and what followed was horrific. Before leaving, he picked up the pipe again and struck her several more times. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he sprayed her body with accelerant from a canister and set it on fire. The fire failed to destroy the evidence as he had hoped. Instead, it only deepened the horror of the crime. The entire attack lasted no more than 15 minutes. As Herman fled, he climbed over a fence, dropping his baseball cap in the process. He also pulled off his t-shirt, stained with blood, and left the scene. The trial began on October 1st, 2019. Herman entered the courtroom with his head bowed, and his lawyers immediately stressed that their client was remorseful. He had written a letter to the Masarwe family, asking for forgiveness and admitting that he had destroyed their lives forever. He wrote, "I'm sorry, your daughter didn't deserve such a terrible and tragic thing to happen to her. I don't expect forgiveness, as I will never be able to forgive myself, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. There is no excuse. I truly apologize. I will pray for you and your family every day. Love, goodbye." But for Aya's family, those words were empty. To them, he was nothing more than the monster who had taken their daughter. It could have been a lengthy trial, but due to the fact that Herman pleaded guilty to the charges against him, the family avoided a lengthy trial. Before the judge passed a sentence, he reviewed all the available evidence in the case. The forensic medical expert, speaking in court, said that Aya spent the last minutes of her life experiencing severe pain and horror. In an attempt to mitigate Herman's responsibility, his lawyers pointed to a difficult childhood. They hired a psychiatrist who described Herman as a product of the system. The psychiatrist also stated that the defendant had a low IQ, that he was impulsive, but had no malicious intent. However, the prosecutor challenged that claim, saying that a difficult childhood is no excuse, and that the attack was cowardly and brutal, and any remorse came far too late. Before pronouncing the verdict, the judge noted that Herman's difficult past, mental problems, and his remorse had been taken into account, but, according to the judge, nothing could justify what he had done. On October 29, 2019, Cody Herman was sentenced to 36 years in prison. He will not be eligible for early release for 30 years. The judge noted that Herman poses a serious risk to society, but his youth and lack of previous convictions do not allow him to impose a life sentence. Later, prosecutors filed an appeal, trying to appeal the verdict and achieve a life sentence, but in 2021, the Victorian Court of Appeal upheld Herman's original sentence. Take a look at this photo. This young woman's name was Alisha Bromfield, and in 2012, she was 21 years old. She had big plans for her life: college graduation, the birth of a daughter, and a career in criminology. But in August 2012, her usual weekend trip ended in tragedy. Her body was found in a hotel room in Wisconsin. What happened to Alisha revealed serious problems in the legal system and led to changes in the legislation of several U.S. states. Alisha was born on August 28, 1990, in Joliet, Illinois. She was one of 5 children in the family. When faced with problems, Alisha preferred to solve them on her own, not wanting to cause unnecessary trouble to her parents. As she grew up, independence became her hallmark. By the summer of 2012, Alisha was in the final stages of her studies. She studied criminology at Western Illinois University. In Alisha's personal life, not everything was as smooth as she would have liked. While studying in college, she dated a guy, but that relationship ended after she became pregnant. He didn't want to take responsibility. By the time of her death, Alisha was about 6.5 months pregnant. She was expecting a baby girl and wanted to give her the name Ava Lucille. Of course, you understand that being a single mother is difficult. There are various problems. For example, financial difficulties. Alisha understood that it would be difficult for her to cope alone, but nevertheless, she was very glad that she would soon become a mother. On the other hand, she relied on the support of family members. In preparation for the birth of the baby, she began to buy everything she needed in advance: bottles, diapers, clothes, and other important little things. She often went shopping and chose comfortable things, imagining how they would be useful in her new life with her baby. At home, she set up a nursery, choosing colors and furniture to her liking. Ava Lucille was supposed to be born in the winter of 2012, just as Alisha was finishing her university exams and starting her paid leave from work. That would give her a couple of months to get used to being a mom and spend more time with her daughter before thinking about going back to work. Alisha worked as a florist at the garden center at Home Depot for almost 6 years. She started working there as a teenager, moonlighting to save some money. The schedule was seasonal, which was great for her studies. Alisha loved her job. She designed storefronts, made bouquets for sale, and communicated with clients. As the date of birth was approaching, Alisha planned to take maternity leave and then, when possible, go back to work. She outlined a plan to devote the first months to the baby, then go part-time, and later, when she gets her degree, find a job in the field of forensic psychology and criminal justice. Later, in numerous interviews, those who knew Alisha said that she was enthusiastic about the future. But in parallel with this optimistic and inspiring line of Alisha's life, another story developed. A dark one. Wrong. Dangerous. Alisha's boss at Home Depot Garden Centers was Brian Cooper, a 36-year-old regional manager. They had been working together for about 5 years, ever since Alisha came to work part-time as a schoolgirl. Brian immediately seemed like a normal boss to her. He helped Alisha by scheduling her shifts around her classes. He told her how to better manage the warehouse and communicate with customers. He also said that when she gained experience, she would be able to move up the career ladder. What do you think happened next? Of course, using his official position, Cooper began to make attempts to hit on Alisha. He did everything to make her treat him not only as a boss. He wanted Alisha to go beyond professional relationships. The 15-year age difference between them did not bother him at all. He hinted at romance and even introduced her to new employees as his girlfriend, even though they had never been together. Using his position, Brian interfered in her affairs. He watched which of her male colleagues she was talking to and could not give her a lunch break if she communicated with them, saying that it interfered with work. Sometimes he tried to kiss her in secluded places, for example, in a warehouse. At first, this happened rarely, but then, when Cooper began to realize that he was in control of the situation, it began to happen more often. This became especially evident when Alisha was pregnant. If you're thinking, oh, she just needed to find another job, then let me remind you that the due date was approaching. Of course, in the world of pink ponies, a pregnant woman can easily find a new job, but in real life everything happens quite differently. Those who think she needed to change jobs, tell me honestly, if you owned a company, would you hire a woman who is due to give birth in 3 months? I think not, but maybe I'm wrong? The reality was that Alisha was afraid of losing her job, and she bluntly told her family and friends about it. She said, and I quote, "I need to keep this job." But it's also impossible to say that she didn't do anything to stop Cooper. She has repeatedly made it clear to Cooper that she is not interested in any romantic relationship between them. She bluntly said that she only saw him as a boss and that his behavior was unacceptable. But in order not to lose her job, which was important to her as a student and future mother, Alisha tried to avoid conflicts. She had to adjust and endure. She communicated with Cooper politely, hoping that this would help avoid problems. She said that her priorities were studies and family, but Cooper didn't take these words seriously. He turned out to be one of those people who don't take no for an answer. The number of refusals Cooper received made the situation progressively worse. Alisha faced public embarrassment when Cooper began using insulting language to her. The way she arranged flowers turned into his permanent criticism point. The public embarrassment Cooper caused Alisha in front of clients made her extremely upset. His angry outbursts led him to randomly throw all objects onto the floor. The incidents were documented by Alisha before she filed official complaints to Home Depot management. The complaints included detailed information about violations together with specific dates and instances of threatening conduct. The outcome she received did not match what she had anticipated. The organization provided Alisha with a weak response to her complaints. The higher management team reviewed Alisha's complaints, but only ordered Cooper to enroll in anger management classes without verifying his completion status, and failed to implement any substantial disciplinary actions, including work suspension. The investigation discovered that Alisha faced harassment and intimidation from Cooper, while multiple other female colleagues at the company experienced similar mistreatment. The organization understood the problem, yet decided to avoid taking strong measures to resolve it. Alisha faced an unpleasant situation at work. The decision to quit her job would result in financial loss because she required the money to support her upcoming child. The available job opportunities did not match her work requirements because they did not accommodate her schedule. Alisha occasionally shared her work-related stress with her mother Sherry, but generally handled it independently because she thought she needed to stay patient until her maternity leave started in 2 months. She decided to bear the difficulties because she believed stability for herself and her unborn child required it. Alisha adjusted her work hours to spend less time alone with Cooper. The pregnancy of Alisha failed to modify Cooper's conduct because he kept making inappropriate personal suggestions to her while understanding her need for financial stability. The scheduling of her work shifts by him disrupted her medical appointments, so she had to delay or cancel them. Alisha chose to tolerate the situation while she attempted to disregard specific difficulties. In August 2012, Cooper invited Alisha to go with him to his sister's wedding in Door County, Wisconsin, which is about a 6-hour drive from their village of Plainfield in Illinois. He made an offer that she couldn't refuse. He presented it as a friendly request, assuring that it was just a family event, nothing personal, and there would be other guests there. Alisha tried to refuse, explaining that she was uncomfortable and that she had her own things to do. And what did Cooper do? Of course, he began to use his official position again. He told Alisha that if she didn't go with him, he would cut her working hours or fire her altogether. She couldn't let that happen, so she had to agree to this trip. Of course, now many will say that under no circumstances should Alisha have agreed to Cooper's proposal. But look, she didn't know where this was going to lead. I mean, if Alisha had known what was going to happen on this trip, of course, she would have sacrificed her job and stayed at home. But she didn't know. So, Alisha agreed to this trip, but put forward the condition that Cooper should book a separate hotel room for her. She hoped that this trip to the wedding would help ease the tension between them. On the morning of August 18, 2012, Alisha and Cooper drove from Plainfield to the Sand Bay Beach Resort in Door County. At the check-in, she found out that Cooper had booked one room for two, although he promised that they would have separate rooms. The room had one double bed. Outraged by his deception, she wrote to her mother Sherry that she had quarreled with him and wanted to leave because he had deceived her again. Cooper apologized, blaming everything on the confusion with the hotel rooms, and persuaded her to stay for the wedding, reminding her that he was participating in the ceremony and his family would be there. They went to an open-air ceremony where Cooper led his sister down the aisle. Alisha stayed so as not to spoil the solemn moment and not to look impolite in front of his family. After the wedding, she texted Sherry that she and Cooper had agreed to stay for the evening reception, spend the night, and return to Illinois the next day, as planned. The wedding went off without any problems, but the tension didn't go away. Alisha told Cooper that after returning to Illinois, their friendship was over. Returning to the hotel room after the wedding, Alisha was going to go to bed, wishing that this night would end as soon as possible and they would return to Illinois. Cooper continued to drink. He didn't stop all evening, and by the night of August 19th, his drunken anger over her refusals had escalated into a new scandal. Cooper invited Alisha to enter into a permanent relationship with him. Alisha refused. She repeated once again that there could be no romantic relationship between them, but also friendship, after all that he had done over the past months. Cooper became enraged after these words, realizing that Alisha would no longer be in his life. He attacked her and began to strangle her. Experts would later say that it lasted about 5 minutes before Alisha died. She resisted and begged him to stop, but Cooper didn't stop until it was too late. But that didn't seem enough to him. He took off Alisha's clothes. Later, he would say that he had long dreamed of seeing what she looked like without clothes. This monster didn't just look, but also acted. He took off his pants, and what he did next is no less terrible than the fact that he took the life of a young pregnant woman. After that, he began to realize what he had just done. Afraid of responsibility, he decided to leave this world on his own, but he didn't have the courage to pull it off. At first, he wanted to use a knife, but it would be very painful. Then he filled the tub, but again, he couldn't carry out his plan. After that, he left the room and went to Sand Bay. Looking at the map, we can see that the hotel is located right by the water, and Cooper saw this as an opportunity. But this attempt was unsuccessful. He didn't have the courage. Soaked to the skin, Cooper got to a local gas station and asked for a phone to call 911. He confessed to the dispatcher that he had attacked his pregnant colleague last night, causing her death. Immediately after the 911 call, the police arrived at the gas station. Cooper was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. At the same time, a group was sent to the hotel, which found Alisha's body on the floor in the room. It was partially covered with a blanket, and a pillow was placed under her head. Signs of a struggle were immediately noticed on her body, bruises and scratches, showing that she was trying to defend herself. Forensic experts were called to the scene. They determined that Alisha died of strangulation. Unfortunately, by this time, her unborn daughter had no chance of salvation. During the interrogation, Cooper described in detail what had happened. He mentioned the quarrel that started because Alisha was going to completely cut him out of her life. He confessed that he started strangling her with his hands and then used a cord. He also described what he did to her body after that, explaining it as his long-standing obsession. I think that by this point, each of you already has a certain attitude, a certain feeling towards Brian Cooper, don't you? It can be anger, disgust, or something else. But there's something else you need to know about this person. During further investigation, the police found plenty of evidence of Cooper's obsession with Alisha. They found videos on his computer that he had made secretly. Shortly after Alisha got a job at the company, Cooper offered her to earn some money by sitting with his dog at his house while he was at work. Alisha agreed. What she didn't know was that Cooper had previously installed a hidden video camera in the bathroom. This camera captured Alisha in intimate moments. Another hidden camera was found in the bathroom of the hotel where the crime took place, which recorded Alisha taking a shower. Cooper was so obsessed with Alisha that he set her date of birth as the unlock code for his phone. It was another sign of his unhealthy interest. The police investigation revealed Alisha had repeatedly reported harassment and threats to Home Depot management, yet the company failed to take appropriate action against Cooper. Multiple female employees under his supervision made reports about experiencing similar harassment at work. The lack of consequences for his actions made him feel untouchable, so he lost all fear. The police used collected evidence to bring Brian Cooper to court for his role in killing Alisha and her unborn child. The court established a $1 million bail for Cooper, but he lacked the funds to post it, so he stayed in jail until his trial started. The trial, which started in early 2013, proved to be a challenging process. Cooper's lawyers based their defense on the fact that he drank a lot at the wedding, and after returning to the hotel, arguing that this greatly clouded his mind. They said that because of this condition, he did not understand what he was doing and did not realize the moral or legal consequences. As I understand it, they hoped that alcohol would become something of an extenuating circumstance. To confirm their version, the lawyers called experts who spoke about the effect of blood alcohol levels on the ability to make decisions. The prosecutors categorically rejected the defense's position, and in my opinion, they made convincing arguments. They said in court that Cooper's confession after his arrest, where he described in detail the quarrel, his actions and their consequences, indicate that he understood what he was doing. He understood the consequences of strangling Alisha. According to prosecutors, another sign that Cooper understood the severity of his guilt and the possible consequences was that he tried to harm himself before calling 911. His former colleagues spoke at the trial, telling about long-standing problems at work. Cooper constantly harassed Alisha, publicly insulted her, and manipulated her schedule. In other words, he did everything to make her obey him. The trial featured hidden camera footage and other digital evidence that showed how obsessed Cooper was and how he abused his power for years. It would seem that everything is obvious in this case, isn't it? But the jury could not reach a unanimous decision. Two of them believed the defense's claim that Cooper was heavily intoxicated, which forced the judge to declare a mistrial. After that, the prosecutor's office began preparing for a new trial. They should have prepared better this time. This outcome of the trial came as a shock to Alisha's family. Her mother, Sherry, considered it a failure of the judicial system. She was sure that intoxication could not be a reason capable of reducing the criminal's responsibility. Sherry decided to act. Together with other members of Alisha's family and friends, she launched a campaign to tell people about what happened. She wanted as many people as possible to find out what the employer's ignoring complaints about harassment in the workplace had led to. Sherry's campaign included online petitions that garnered thousands of signatures. She wrote letters to state and federal authorities, and also met with Wisconsin politicians. Sherry pointed out that Alisha's case is an example of systemic problems where employers such as Home Depot ignore employee complaints. Sherry's persistence has produced results. In the spring of 2014, the governor of Wisconsin signed a law prohibiting the use of voluntary intoxication as a defense in criminal cases. This law was a direct response to the tactics used in Cooper's first trial and was made possible by Sherry's active work. The changes in Wisconsin set an example for others, and in the following years, 31 states adopted similar reforms. Unfortunately, people like Cooper have always been, are, and will be, but now they will have fewer loopholes to escape full responsibility. Cooper's retrial began in May 2014. The new law has not yet been applied, but the defense mentioned intoxication only as a possible mitigating factor. The prosecutor's office carefully reworked its arguments, again presenting a recording of Cooper's confession, where he described his thoughts during the attack. Alisha's colleagues talked about how Cooper had been stalking her for years. He isolated her from others by manipulating her work schedule. He publicly insulted her and threatened to fire her in order to force her to comply with his personal requests. The jury was once again shown digital evidence, including secret recordings from the bathroom, which showed Cooper spying on Alisha. Witnesses confirmed that he constantly violated her personal boundaries, Home Depot employees said that the company did not seriously interfere, despite Alicia's numerous appeals. Moreover, at least 3 of her complaints were completely ignored. In May 2014, Cooper was found guilty. On July 24, 2014, he was sentenced to 2 life terms without the right to early release. Both terms must be served consecutively. Alicia's employers, Home Depot, Grand Flower Growers, and Grand Service, also faced a lawsuit. Alicia's mother, Sherry, filed a wrongful death lawsuit in 2014. The case was settled out of court in 2018, and the details remain confidential. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel, where we dive into true crime stories. Today, we're diving into the chilling case of Anita Knutson, an 18-year-old college student whose life was cut short in a small North Dakota city. It was June 3, 2007, in Minot, a quiet community anchored by its Air Force Base, where violent crimes were almost unheard of. Anita was a bright, ambitious freshman at Minot State University, embracing the excitement of independent living in a modest off-campus apartment she shared with a roommate. That morning, her father, Gordon Knutson, stopped by for a routine visit after not hearing from her over the weekend. What he found would shatter his world forever. Anita lay dead in her own bed, stabbed twice in the chest. Blood soaked the sheets, and a bloody pocket knife was right there in the room, rinsed in the sink, but still bearing traces of the horror. There was no sign of forced entry through the door, which was locked, and the apartment seemed otherwise undisturbed. No ransacking, no obvious struggle. It looked like she'd been caught completely off guard, perhaps while resting or asleep, by someone who might have been familiar enough to slip in without raising alarms. Police arrived swiftly, swarming the scene and launching an investigation that would uncover layers of mystery. Who could have done this to a kind, unassuming young woman like Anita? Was it a random intruder, or someone from her inner circle harboring hidden resentments? The lack of chaos suggested intimacy, yet the details, like that slashed bedroom window screen found on the ground outside, hinted at something more calculated. As the community reeled in shock, questions piled up. Why leave the weapon behind? And how did the killer vanish without a trace in such a small city? This heartbreaking discovery marked the beginning of a long, twisting journey for answers. But to truly understand the weight of what happened, we need to step back and explore Anita's world, the everyday routines, relationships, and subtle tensions that might hold the key to unraveling this puzzle. Anita grew up in the small, tight-knit town of Butte, North Dakota, surrounded by a loving family that shaped her into the kind, responsible young woman she became. Adopted as a baby by her parents, Gordon and Sharon Knutson, along with her siblings Daniel and Anna, Anita stood out from an early age for her caring nature, always quick to help others, and her dedication to her studies. She thrived in school, building strong foundations that would carry her forward. Graduating from Velva High School in 2006, Anita took the exciting step to Minot State University, where she pursued a major in elementary education. Her dream was clear: to become a teacher, drawing from the positive influences of her own educators to inspire the next generation. To fund her college life, she juggled multiple part-time jobs, including as a housekeeper at the Fairfield Inn, in retail sales at Vanity and the local mall, and at the eTelecare call center, highlighting her strong work ethic and ability to balance a demanding schedule. In Minot, Anita shared an off-campus apartment with a female roommate, savoring the independence of young adulthood. While the setup brought freedom, it wasn't without its challenges. She occasionally mentioned to her family minor disagreements over everyday issues like cleaning duties or noise levels. Still, these seemed like typical growing pains, nothing that overshadowed her positive outlook. She built a solid network of friends through her classes and workplaces, enjoying low-key social time that kept her grounded amid the busyness. Her daily rhythm was simple, yet fulfilling. Mornings dedicated to lectures and coursework, afternoons at her jobs, and evenings for relaxation or catching up with loved ones. On the surface, Anita's life brimmed with potential. The promise of a career she loved, supportive relationships, and the thrill of charting her own path. But as we'll see, even in this seemingly ordinary routine, there were threads that, in hindsight, might weave into the tragedy that unfolded. With this glimpse into who Anita was, let's turn to those final fateful days leading up to her death, where the cracks in her normal world began to show. Anita's life in Minot had settled into a comfortable, predictable rhythm by the spring of 2007, a blend of academic pursuits, work shifts, and quiet personal time that reflected her growing independence. But the weekend of June 1st through June 4th would shatter that normalcy forever, turning ordinary moments into clues scrutinized for years. Let's rewind to Friday, June 1st, the last day anyone could confirm Anita followed her routine without a hint of trouble. She started with morning classes at Minot State University. After wrapping up her lectures, she headed to her part-time shift at the Fairfield Inn, where she worked as a housekeeper. Coworkers would later remember her as consistently reliable and upbeat, always arriving on time and bringing a positive energy to the team. She finished in the late afternoon and returned to her apartment, a modest student space filled with books, clothes, and the everyday clutter of college life. Once home, Anita made her habitual call to her mother, Sharon, sharing updates from her day in a conversation that felt entirely routine. No worries, no conflicts, just the warmth of family connection. With her roommate out of town visiting family, Anita had the place to herself that evening. She likely spent the time unwinding, perhaps reading a book or listening to music, her go-to ways to relax after a long week. Friends knew her as someone who enjoyed casual social outings, but didn't always seek them out. There's no record of her leaving the apartment that night, suggesting a quiet end to her Friday. As Saturday, June 2nd dawned, the first signs of something amiss began to emerge. Anita was scheduled for another shift at the Fairfield Inn, but she didn't show up, a rarity for someone so dependable. Coworkers tried calling her, but the phone rang unanswered. Back in Butte, Sharon attempted to reach her daughter multiple times over the weekend, growing concerned when the silence stretched on. Anita's family knew her as responsible, so they hoped it was something minor, like a forgotten charger or a busy schedule. The unease carried into Sunday, June 3rd, with more unanswered calls piling up. In the early hours, around 2 a.m., Anita sent a few simple text messages to a friend, casual exchanges that revealed no distress, just everyday chatter. These would prove to be her final known communications. By Monday, June 4th, the worry had escalated to action. Gordon, unable to shake his growing dread after Sharon's reports of the silence, decided to drive from Butte to check on Anita. Upon arrival, her car in the lot offered false hope. He knocked, but silence greeted him. Peering through the bedroom window, he spotted the slashed screen lying on the ground outside, a chilling hint of intrusion, before glimpsing Anita's body on the bed, covered by a robe amid bloodied sheets. With the property manager's help, they unlocked the door, and the nightmare unfolded. Police were summoned at 5:12 p.m., quickly securing the perimeter, cordoning off the area with tape, and calling in detectives and crime scene technicians. They documented everything meticulously: photographs of the room, fingerprints dusted from surfaces, and potential evidence collected, all in hopes of piecing together how this could have happened. What immediately struck investigators was the eerie lack of disruption. No furniture overturned, no belongings scattered, suggesting Anita might have been asleep or relaxed when the attack occurred, unaware of the danger until it was too late. The apartment door showed no forced entry and had been locked from the outside with a key, but the bedroom window screen lay slashed on the ground, a potential entry point for an intruder. As night fell, the medical examiner examined the body on site before transport for a full autopsy. Initial findings pointed to 2 deep stab wounds in her upper chest as the cause of death, with one lacerating her heart for a swift end, and the time of death estimated sometime on June 2nd or early June 3rd, based on the body's condition. No evidence of sexual assault emerged, and nothing seemed stolen. Her purse, phone, and other items remained in place, eliminating robbery as a motive and suggesting the killer had a targeted personal reason. In the kitchen sink, the small pocket knife, still bloodied, was bagged as the likely weapon. It appeared ordinary, possibly from the apartment, raising questions about whether the killer brought it or grabbed it impulsively. All evidence, bedding, clothing, swabs, was sent to the state crime lab in Bismarck for DNA and fingerprint analysis, with hopes that profiles from the handle could identify who wielded it. The word spread quickly, devastating friends, family, and the community. Anita's sister Anna, then just 15, would later recall the family's world crumbling. As the shock settled, the full weight of the investigation kicked in, with police chasing leads that would twist and turn for years. The next day, June 5th, brought a press conference at City Hall, where Lieutenant Dan Strandberg addressed reporters and anxious residents. He described the death as the work of an apparent intruder, but noted the rarity of such violence in Minot, a city of about 40,000. In my experience, victims and suspects usually have some close relationship, Strandberg shared, withholding specifics to protect the probe while pleading for public tips. Investigators wasted no time on interviews, starting with those nearest to Anita. Gordon recounted his drive, the unanswered calls, and spotting the slashed screen with maintenance worker Marty Annell, who was questioned about building security and any unusual sightings. Sharon detailed their last normal phone call, while siblings like Anna shared memories of Anita's gentle spirit and any offhand mentions of tensions. The focus widened to her daily contacts. Fairfield Inn and Vanity co-workers confirmed her unusual no-show, expressing disbelief. University friends described her as friendly and involved, without apparent foes, as detectives dug for romantic links or grudges. The roommate, Nicole Thomas, back from her weekend away, provided insights into their living arrangement, acknowledging occasional friction over chores, but nothing severe. Tips began flowing in by June 7th, including the witness account of the man running from the area on June 3rd. His description distributed via sketches, though no identifications followed. Neighborhood canvases uncovered rumors of nearby parties or strangers, but leads evaporated. The partial autopsy release on June 13th confirmed the knife's role, but lab results on DNA, a mix including Anita's, and fingerprints yielded no database matches. Amid the investigation, Minot's community came together in grief. Anita's memorial on June 11, 2007, at Oak Valley Lutheran Church drew hundreds, who shared stories of her art, dreams, and kindness. She was laid to rest in Butte Cemetery, with her family vowing to seek justice. To encourage tips, they offered a $10,000 reward, matched by $5,000 from state investigators and boosted by local contributions to over $20,000, hoping to spark new leads, though calls soon dwindled. By late 2007, with leads exhausted and no arrests, the Minot Police Department classified the case as cold. Dozens of interviews were conducted, evidence from the crime scene was processed, but nothing led to a breakthrough in the investigation. The pocket knife from the sink, with its mixed DNA, including Anita's on the blade and degraded profiles on the handle, offered no clear matches in databases. Anita's family refused to let her story fade, keeping the reward fund active to encourage any lingering information. This incentive sparked occasional tips, rumors of suspicious neighbors, overheard arguments, or strangers near the apartment, but most proved fruitless. Police revisited cleared suspects, like the maintenance worker at the apartment complex and roofing crews spotted nearby, but their alibis were airtight. The mysterious man seen running from the area remained a ghost. No sketches could identify him. Even tips about a group speaking Spanish near the complex led nowhere, leaving investigators with no solid leads. By 2008, a year after the murder, the case remained unsolved, and Minot residents grew cautious as they went about their daily lives. Anonymous calls to Crime Stoppers hinted at possible jealousies or romantic entanglements in Anita's circle, but verifications came up empty. Detectives pored over photos, questioning the lack of theft and the locked door. Could the killer have had a key, staging the window to mislead? By 2009, media attention waned, though the family kept vigils alive, urging tips in local news. Online discussions speculated wildly, from transient serial offenders to overlooked connections, but authorities dismissed them as unsubstantiated. The stagnation persisted through 2010 and 2011, with sparse tips yielding no traction. Anita's siblings spoke out about the emotional toll, pleading for closure. The family's grief deepened in 2013 when Daniel, struggling with the loss of his sister, took his own life, a tragedy Anna later linked to the devastating impact of Anita's unsolved murder. By the 5-year mark in 2012, police acknowledged that without new evidence, resolution seemed distant, even as forensic technology evolved. Cross-checks with regional unsolved cases turned up no links, and theories lingered in limbo. Hope flickered in 2015, on what would have been Anita's birthday, when the family presented a petition with over 1,000 signatures to the police, demanding renewed efforts and suggesting outreach to shows like Cold Justice. This reignited local coverage and led to a feature on NBC's Cold Case Spotlight, prompting a fresh wave of calls. Still, no game changers. Behind the scenes, the push encouraged a file review, setting the stage for subtle shifts. In 2016, DNA advancements provided a pivotal update. Retesting the knife isolated a partial profile from the handle, too limited for databases but viable for direct comparisons. It ruled out several males from Anita's orbit, but didn't exclude certain female connections, quietly redirecting scrutiny toward overlooked dynamics, like roommate relations. Follow-up interviews sought statement discrepancies, but the case remained dormant, progress incremental at best. Change arrived in 2018 with Detective Macaulay Talbot assuming the file. Her fresh perspective prompted a comprehensive review, re-interviews, and alibi cross-checks with emerging digital records. The breakthrough came in 2021 when Minot Police partnered with Cold Justice. The team re-interviewed witnesses and retested evidence, uncovering new statements from people claiming Nicole Rice confessed to the murder years earlier. DNA on the knife, though not conclusive, couldn't rule her out. These findings, tied to early reports of roommate disputes, pointed directly to Anita's former roommate. On March 16, 2022, police arrested Nicole Rice, previously Nicole Thomas before her marriage, charging her with murder, a major break after 15 years of dead ends. But would these confessions and evidence hold up in court? As the case moved to trial, the question loomed. Was Nicole Rice the killer, or had police targeted the wrong person? The trial of Nicole Rice for the murder of her former roommate, Anita, thrust the long-dormant case back into the spotlight, unfolding in a courtroom nearly 18 years after the shocking discovery in Minot. After her 2022 arrest, Rice pleaded not guilty to felony murder charges. To ensure fairness amid local media frenzy fueled by the Cold Justice involvement, the proceedings were relocated from Minot to Grand Forks, North Dakota. Jury selection moved swiftly, and the trial commenced on March 18, 2025, presided over by District Court Judge Richard Hagar. Over 7 grueling days, more than 20 witnesses testified, weaving a tale of escalating roommate tensions, investigative flaws, and circumstantial threads that the prosecution aimed to tie into a conviction. Yet, as details emerged, uncertainties loomed, leaving everyone wondering if this would finally deliver the closure Anita's family had chased for nearly 2 decades. Prosecutors opened with a compelling narrative of pent-up resentment exploding into violence, asserting that Nicole Rice stabbed Anita twice in the chest during the early hours of June 3, 2007, amid ongoing household conflicts. They spotlighted Rice's inconsistent statements over the years, initially claiming she was visiting her parents' farm that weekend, but later mentioning outings with friends, including a night at a bar in Russo, 40 miles away, before returning to the apartment. These clashing stories raised red flags for investigators, undermining her alibi. Central to their case was the pocket knife, with forensic experts testifying to the mixed DNA on its handle. While Anita's blood dominated the blade, the handle's profiles couldn't definitively exclude Rice, despite degradation. Dr. William Sens, the autopsy pathologist, vividly described the wounds: 2 deep chest punctures, 1 piercing the heart, with no defensive injuries to suggest Anita fought back, implying she was attacked in a vulnerable state, like sleep. Testimonies built the emotional core, beginning with Anita's parents, Gordon and Sharon, who shared her college excitement and subtle complaints about roommate discord over noise and chores. Gordon revisited the discovery, suggesting the slashed window screen might have been a diversion to mimic an intruder. Co-workers from the eTelecare call center, where both women worked in 2007, added fuel. Matthew Hansen and Donna Bjelland recounted Rice's frequent heated rants about Anita, including a petty dispute where Anita allegedly unplugged Rice's fish tank filter, killing the fish and igniting further clashes. Hansen noted complaints about Anita's alarm disrupting sleep, portraying a shared space rife with toxicity. The prosecution delivered a bombshell by presenting alleged confessions from Nicole Rice, calling witnesses whose testimonies revealed details that only the killer should know, casting serious doubt on her innocence. Christina Haller, a friend of Rice, testified that in 2008, at a house party in Minot where Rice was heavily intoxicated, she confessed to stabbing Anita, even referencing holdback details not released to the public, like covering Anita's body with a robe and describing her as looking so peaceful after the attack, which matched unreleased crime scene information. William May, Rice's ex-boyfriend at the time, corroborated this by recounting a similar admission during a car ride home from another gathering that same year. He said Rice, slurring her words while drunk, admitted to the murder and provided details that aligned with the holdback evidence, though he didn't report it until prompted by cold justice investigators in 2021. These late-emerging confessions, which surfaced over a decade after the crime, became central to the state's case, suggesting Rice had harbored guilt and slipped up in private conversations, details the defense dismissed as unreliable, drunken gossip from unreliable memories, but which prosecutors argued proved her direct knowledge of the crime scene. Detective Macaulay Talbot testified on the reopened investigation, highlighting Anita's casual 2 a.m. texts showing no alarm and how Rice's alibi unraveled under fresh scrutiny. Dale Plessis, the initial responding officer and later investigations commander, discussed early challenges like staffing shortages from oil booms and floods, but affirmed the evidence now converged on Rice. Wrapping their case, prosecutors called Rice's aunt, Brenda Glynns, for a stunning revelation. Rice had confided that Anita deserved to die and described the scene in matching detail, including the robe and serene expression.
It was so horrible, she said, to just see Anita lying there, but she looked so peaceful, covered up.
Did she say
with a
anything
robe, and said that there was a bowl of water in the bathroom sink, that whoever did this washed themselves up and washed the knife up.
Did Nicole ever say anything to you specifically about Anita deserving to die?
Yes.
What'd she say?
She deserved to die.
Mid-trial shifted to forensics, with state lab analyst Gebhardt explaining the knife's contaminated DNA as supportive of a familiar handler, perhaps one who attempted a cleanup. crime scene officers reiterated the lack of burglary signs and the locked door, while the cut screen lacked outsider traces like footprints. The cold justice influence surfaced through producer testimonies, admitting they encouraged tips leading to the confessions. Defense attorneys Philip Becher and Richard Sand fired back, framing the case as a product of flawed policing and media sensationalism. In openings, they argued no direct proof linked Rice, no eyewitnesses, no ironclad DNA, and motives too trivial for murder. They accused the investigation of tunnel vision post-cold justice, prioritizing ratings over rigor. Their key witness, former FBI agent James Douglas Counds, now a private investigator, dissected the 7,000-page case file, exposing neglected leads. The unidentified man seen running from the apartment, roofing workers spotted nearby, a Spanish-speaking group in the area, and other potential suspects overlooked by police. He argued these loose ends pointed to a rushed investigation, casting doubt on the focus on Rice. Coons critiqued unlogged interviews, untested items, and reliance on drunken gossip from delayed witnesses. Cross-examinations were intense. The defense challenged confession accounts, noting Holler and May only reported after cold justice prompts, implying coached or fabricated memories for notoriety. They dismissed the DNA as unreliable contamination from shared living and downplayed spats as standard college drama, not homicidal triggers. Rice opted not to testify, but her attorneys highlighted her post-2007 life: stable employment at the Air Force Base, 2 marriages, and no indicators of lingering guilt. After 7 grueling days of testimony, the sequestered jury of 12 retreated to deliberate, carrying the weight of 18 years of grief and unanswered questions. For 5.5 hours over 2 days, March 25th and 26th, 2025, they sifted through confessions, DNA evidence, and a tangled web of roommate disputes in a Grand Forks courtroom thick with anticipation. Families, supporters, and reporters held their breath as Judge Richard Hagar's voice broke the silence on March 26th, announcing the verdict.
And the defendant, Nicole Aaron Rice, not guilty of...
Nicole Rice collapsed in tears, embracing her attorneys and family, their relieved cheers filling the room, though her legal team later apologized for the emotional outburst, citing 3 years of intense pressure. For Anita's family, who had clung to hope for justice for nearly 2 decades, the verdict was a devastating blow. Anita's sister, Anna, left the courtroom in silence, later sharing a heartfelt post on social media. A not guilty verdict does not mean innocence. My conscience is clear, unlike the conscience of the jury. Her words captured the family's anguish and unwavering belief in seeking truth for Anita. After 18 years, Anita's murder remains an unsolved puzzle. Why didn't she show up for work that Saturday, despite being alive? Why did she stop answering calls from family and friends, yet sent casual texts late Sunday night? What happened in those final hours after she returned home Friday until her last message? With no convicted killer, these questions haunt Minot, unanswered. If Nicole Rice wasn't the killer, who was? Share your theories in the comments below. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel, where we dive into true crime stories. Today, we're stepping into a haunting case from the heart of Missouri that shook a small community and left lingering questions about trust and hidden dangers. This is the story of Alyssa Shippert, a 22-year-old woman from Platte County whose ordinary day turned into a nightmare. It all started on a warm spring afternoon in late May 2011. Alyssa, known to her friends and family as a kind-hearted soul with a love for the outdoors, decided to head out for some solo fishing along the Platte River. That day, she grabbed her gear and drove to the Platte Falls Conservation Area, a peaceful spot with a boat ramp where locals often escaped for quiet time by the water. But as the hours ticked by, she didn't return home. Her family grew worried when calls went unanswered, and by evening, they knew something was off. The next morning, on June 1st, authorities received a call from a man on his lunch break who was walking near the riverbank. What he stumbled upon sent shockwaves through Platte County. Alyssa's body, partially submerged downstream from where she'd been fishing, clad only in a bikini top. Her car was still parked at the boat ramp, untouched, with her fishing gear nearby, which raised more questions. When authorities arrived, they immediately understood that this was no accident. The scene suggested a violent confrontation, and from that moment, Platte County law enforcement began what would become one of the most unsettling investigations in the region's recent history. News of Alyssa's death spread quickly. For a county where everyone seemed to know each other, it was almost impossible to comprehend. Who would want to harm her? Why here, at a familiar spot by the river? And most of all, who could have done it? Alyssa grew up in Platte City, Missouri, a town where neighbors often knew each other by name, and family roots ran deep. After high school, Alyssa did not immediately follow the traditional path of college or a corporate career. Instead, she chose hard work and self-sufficiency, taking a job as a cashier at Casey's General Store in Platte City. But Alyssa wasn't defined only by her work. Those who knew her well described her as a woman with passions and interests that gave her joy. Fishing, especially along the Platte River, became one of her favorite ways to spend time. That connection to the outdoors reflected her personality, grounded, direct, and unafraid to be herself. Alyssa's family later said that she lived her life authentically, without pretending to be someone she wasn't. On the morning of June 1st, 2011, the Platte Falls Conservation Area remained as serene as ever, a stretch of land managed by the Missouri Department of Conservation, encompassing about 2,300 acres along the Platte River. This spot, just east of Platte City, drew locals for its natural beauty, with trails winding through wooded areas, open fields, and access points to the water for activities like fishing and boating. The river itself, meandering through the county, offered calm shallows and deeper channels, bordered by rocky banks and vegetation that provided a sense of seclusion. Around noon that day, a local man named Brian McKinney, who worked nearby, took his lunch break in the conservation area. He often used this time to stretch his legs and enjoy the outdoors, walking along the riverbank paths that offered views of the water. As he strolled downstream from the boat ramp area, where the river curved gently, he noticed something unusual in the shallows. Partially submerged and caught against the bank was what appeared to be a human form, face down in the water. Drawing closer, he realized it was a woman's body, clad only in a bikini top, with visible signs of severe injury. Shocked by the sight, he immediately contacted authorities to report his find. Deputies from the Platte County Sheriff's Office responded promptly, arriving at the scene to confirm the report and begin securing the area. The location was specific, downstream from the Platte Falls boat ramp, a popular entry point for river activities, where the water flowed steadily but not too forcefully that day. The body had drifted a short distance, estimated at about a quarter mile from where Alyssa's car was later found parked, untouched, with her fishing equipment still nearby. Upon arrival, the deputies cordoned off the riverbank, marking a perimeter to preserve any potential evidence. They noted the body's position, partially in the water, with the upper half on the muddy edge, and observed extensive trauma, particularly to the head region. Scattered nearby on the dry bank were small bone fragments and areas of blood staining the ground, indicating the incident had occurred close by before the body entered the river. Medical personnel were summoned to the site, and the county medical examiner's office took charge of the initial examination. The woman was pronounced dead at the scene, with preliminary observations pointing to blunt force trauma as the cause of the injuries. Her identity wasn't immediately clear, as no personal items like identification were found on her, but the deputies began cross-referencing missing persons reports from the area. Alyssa's family had already reported her missing the previous evening, when she didn't return home or answer calls, so a connection was made relatively quickly through descriptions and vehicle records. Lab tests, including dental records and other forensic methods, would later confirm it was indeed Alyssa Faye Shippert. But at that moment, the focus was on preserving the integrity of the site. As word of the discovery spread through official channels, more resources poured in. The Platte County Sheriff's Office, led by Sheriff Richard Anderson at the time, mobilized a team of detectives and crime scene technicians. They photographed the area extensively, using grids to map out the riverbank and collect physical evidence. Items like the bone fragments were carefully bagged and tagged for analysis, while search teams combed the surrounding woods and water edges for anything that might explain what had transpired. Divers from the Missouri State Highway Patrol were called in later that week to search the riverbed for additional clues, though initial efforts on June 1st centered on the immediate vicinity. The conservation area's trails and parking lots were checked for tire tracks or discarded items, and rangers who patrolled the land were interviewed about any unusual activity reported in recent days. Investigators knew that understanding the timeline was crucial. They estimated the body had been in the water overnight, based on environmental factors like the river's current and temperature, which was mild that spring. The Platte River's flow, influenced by recent rains but not flooding, could have carried the body from an upstream point near the boat ramp. Authorities held a press briefing to share limited details, emphasizing that the investigation was active and urging the public to come forward with tips. A hotline was set up through the Greater Kansas City Crime Stoppers, offering anonymity and a potential reward for information leading to answers. Detectives followed up on early leads, such as reports of vehicles seen near the boat ramp the previous day, but many proved unrelated. The medical examiner transported the body to the morgue for a full autopsy, which would take place in the coming days to determine the official cause and manner of death. Preliminary reports confirmed the head injuries were extensive, consistent with forceful impacts, but details like time of death were refined through toxicology and other tests. As the initial evidence from the riverbank underwent lab analysis, detectives from the Platte County Sheriff's Office pressed on with a thorough canvass of Alyssa's world, determined to trace any thread that might explain her tragic end. Forensic teams scrutinized the bone fragments and blood samples collected near the water's edge, but the river's current had washed away much of the potential DNA, leaving limited traces to work with. This setback meant relying heavily on human accounts, so investigators expanded their interviews beyond the immediate scene, reaching out to those who knew her best in hopes of uncovering a motive or overlooked detail. They started with her family, delving into her home life and relationships. Her father, Landis Shippert, described her as a wonderful daughter who had recently cut her long hair to donate to cancer patients and was eager to assist with tornado relief efforts in Joplin. Her sister, Pam Clark, portrayed Alyssa as a free spirit with a beautiful personality, someone who cherished the outdoors and maintained strong bonds without any apparent conflicts. No family tensions emerged, and relatives confirmed she had no known disputes or enemies that could point to foul play. Shifting to her social circle, police spoke with friends who echoed similar sentiments. Alyssa was easygoing, involved in her church community, and kept a low-key routine that rarely strayed from work and family time. They asked about her romantic life, probing whether she had been seeing anyone or if recent interactions stood out, but nothing unusual surfaced. At her workplace, the convenience store in Platte City, where she'd been employed for years, co-workers provided insights into her daily interactions. They described her as friendly with customers and staff alike, often acting as a mentor to newer employees. Investigators asked about any odd customer behavior or workplace dynamics, including if she'd mentioned plans to go fishing that day. Several colleagues confirmed she'd shared her excitement for the outing, but no one recalled tensions or threats. As weeks stretched into months, the case began to cool. Summer brought no breakthroughs, despite repeated reviews of phone records showing Alyssa's last calls were mundane, checking in with family before heading out. Detectives revisited the autopsy findings, which detailed extensive blunt force trauma consistent with a heavy object, but without a weapon recovered, progress stalled. Then, in late December 2011, a chilling call came in around 4 a.m. on the 26th. Deputies rushed to an apartment in Farrellview, about 10 miles from Platte City, where they found a 21-year-old woman gravely injured from a razor attack that had left her abdomen slashed open. She was unconscious, but alive, rushed to the hospital where she fought for her life. Her boyfriend, who had spoken with her earlier that night around 1:30 a.m., reported she'd mentioned a male acquaintance visiting her home. When she regained consciousness on December 30th, she provided a crucial statement, identifying the man as someone she knew casually. This unexpected lead prompted detectives to bring him in for voluntary questioning on January 6th. But what truly stunned investigators was the name the survivor provided: Quentin Odell. The revelation hit like a bolt. Odell wasn't a stranger. He had been a colleague of Alyssa's at the convenience store. Quentin Odell grew up in the same small-town environment as Alyssa, attending local schools where he crossed paths with her sister. He held a job at the Platte City convenience store alongside Alyssa for a period, giving him familiarity with her routine and social circle. Described by those who knew him as someone who blended into the community without drawing much attention, Odell lived a relatively unremarkable life prior to these events. No prior criminal record surfaced in public reports, which made his involvement all the more surprising to those around him. His connections extended to Alyssa's family. He'd been inside their home and interacted with her father on occasion, underscoring how intertwined lives could be in a place like Platte County. During the interrogation sessions on January 5th and 6th, Odell provided a detailed account that pieced together his actions. He explained that he had gone to the river that May afternoon and encountered Alyssa while she fished. According to his statement, he swam in the water, leading her to believe he had drowned. When he resurfaced, a confrontation ensued. Odell described how both reached for the hatchet on his belt, and he struck her in the back of the head with it. She then collapsed to the ground, crying. Odell said he got down on his knees and repeatedly struck her in the face with the hatchet until she was no longer crying or breathing. He then pulled her body into the river before floating back to Platte City, where he showered and went to bed as if nothing had happened. In a separate telling to investigators, he noted that Alyssa had done something to anger him during the encounter, prompting the fatal response with the hatchet. The motive, as outlined in Odell's own words, centered on that sudden escalation at the riverbank, a mix of perceived threat during the struggle and immediate anger from whatever transpired in those moments. Prosecutors highlighted the premeditated nature through the use of the hatchet, which he carried with him, but Odell framed it as a reactive clash rather than planned. In that late December incident at the Farrellview apartment, Odell described heading over to visit the 21-year-old woman on the 26th. During his first talk with investigators, he claimed he'd left while she was still alive and unharmed. But in a follow-up interview, he shared more details about what unfolded inside. He said he'd overheard her on the phone, getting into a heated argument with a recent boyfriend. That conversation set him off, leading him to grab a razor blade from the kitchen table. He then simply walked out, headed home, and only noticed the dried blood on his hands and shirt the next morning. In his account, he disposed of the shirt right away. but that was only part of the truth. Following the confession that linked Quinton Odell to both incidents, authorities moved swiftly to formalize his custody. On January 7, 2012, deputies officially charged the 22-year-old with first-degree murder and armed criminal action in connection to Alyssa's case, along with similar counts for the December assault on the other woman. Additional charges were later added in June 2012 for the second victim, a 21-year-old woman from Farrellview, including forcible sodomy stemming from deviant sexual intercourse during the razor attack that left her gravely injured. This was corroborated by her hospital statements and forensic evidence from the scene. Bond was set at $2 million, reflecting the severity of the allegations, and Odell remained detained as the process unfolded. In Alyssa's case, no sexual violence charges were filed, as the autopsy revealed her cause of death as multiple blunt force injuries to the head with no indications of such assault, and Odell's confession described only a confrontation escalating to strikes with a hatchet before dragging her body into the river, without any reference to a sexual motive. Her body was found partially nude, clad only in a bikini top, which aligned with the warm spring day when she went fishing. She likely wore swimwear for comfort by the water, and the lower clothing may have been lost during the struggle or due to the river's current, though sources don't specify beyond that. Platte County prosecutor Eric Zand pushed for capital punishment, emphasizing the calculated nature of the acts and their impact on the community, arguing that Odell's use of weapons and the severity of the injuries warranted the harshest response under Missouri law. The state portrayed him as someone who had exploited trust, given his prior acquaintance with Alyssa through work, and highlighted how his actions in both cases demonstrated a pattern of deliberate harm. On the defense side, Odell's attorneys worked to mitigate the outcome, contending that while the events were tragic, factors like his lack of prior record and the reactive elements in his account, such as the described struggle at the river, should spare him from execution. They advocated for a plea deal, underscoring the risks of a jury trial where emotional testimony could sway toward the death sentence. This strategy paid off when, on January 24, 2013, Odell appeared in Platte County Circuit Court and entered guilty pleas to 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of armed criminal action, and 1 count each of first-degree assault and forcible sodomy related to the 2 incidents. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the pursuit of the death penalty, opting instead for a life sentence without parole on the murder charge, plus consecutive terms totaling 100 years for the other offenses. During his sentencing, Odell apologized to his victims and the victims' families. Judge Abe Schaefer accepted the plea and imposed the sentence immediately, ensuring Odell would spend the rest of his days behind bars at a Missouri state prison. Hey everyone, welcome back to Checkered Sky. Today, we're stepping into a haunting true crime case from South Carolina that began with an innocent online connection and vanished into a web of questions. This is the story of Ashley Piggrim, a 29-year-old mom whose casual first date turned into a puzzle that gripped a community and exposed the risks hiding behind a screen. It was spring 2015 in the quiet town of Somerville, near Charleston. Ashley, a hardworking single mom balancing life with her kids, had connected with someone on meetme.com. They'd been messaging on Kik for about a month when they decided to meet in person. On April 3rd, around 9:30 p.m., he picked her up from home in a Hyundai Sonata. The next morning, her family found a message from him claiming he'd left her at the gas station because she was too drunk. But they knew that didn't add up. She always checked in, especially with her kids waiting. Her loved ones reported her missing immediately, sparking a community search and police involvement. To truly grasp why Ashley's sudden absence sent shockwaves through her close-knit circle, we need to step back and look at the woman behind the mystery. Ashley Piggrim grew up in Summerville, South Carolina, in a family that valued togetherness above all. She shared a home with her mother and sister, Brandy Chance, in a modest setup where they even pooled resources like a single cell phone for the household. At 28 years old, Ashley was a devoted mother to 3 young children, pouring her heart into raising them with warmth and patience. Friends and family described her as the kind of mom who preferred playtime over strict rules, often coming across more like a fun companion than an authority figure. Life hadn't always been easy for her. After the father of her sons passed away, Ashley grappled with deep sadness that sometimes led to choices she might not have made otherwise, like turning to drinks to ease the ache. Her mother set boundaries against that around the kids, so Ashley would step out to unwind, always aiming to return refreshed for her family. It was April 3rd, 2015, and Ashley had been talking to this guy named Edward Bonilla for about a month through apps like MeetMe and Kik. They'd decided to meet up in person for the first time that evening. She got ready at home in Summerville, putting on a gray sweater, jeans, and some new shoes. She told her family it was just a casual thing, heading out for a few drinks, no big deal. Around 9:30 p.m., Edward pulled up in his Hyundai Sonata, but he didn't come to the door or introduce himself. He just waited in the car. That was a little off for her family, since they usually liked to get a quick look at whoever she was going out with, but Ashley hopped in and they drove off. They headed to a bonfire at Edward's brother's house in Goose Creek. It was a family get-together, with people sitting around the fire or playing ping pong in the garage. They got there right after 9:30 p.m., and Ashley started chatting with folks. One of the people there, Edward's brother's girlfriend, met her for the first time and thought she seemed nice and friendly. Ashley had a couple of beers from a six-pack she brought, but she didn't look drunk or out of it. She was steady, talking normally, and enjoying herself. They stayed until about 11:45 p.m., when Edward said it was time to go. Ashley wasn't in a rush. She still had some beer left and wanted to hang out longer, but he grabbed the rest of her six-pack from the fridge and they left in the Sonata. Just after midnight on April 4th, they stopped at a Sunoco gas station on College Park Road because Ashley needed the restroom. Cameras caught the car pulling in at 12:04 a.m. She got out, went inside, used the bathroom, and came back out at 12:11 a.m., looking fine. No issues visible. She got back in the car, and they drove away a minute later. After that, according to Edward's later story, things got heated in the car. He said Ashley started yelling, accusing him of stealing her mom's phone, even though she hadn't taken the family phone with her that night. He claimed she got so upset that she wanted out near a mobile home park, which was only about 1.5 miles from her house. He said he let her out there to use the bathroom again and then drove off after the argument, figuring she'd walk home. At Ashley's house, the night stayed quiet, no door opening with her usual, "Mom, I'm home." At 3:29 a.m., a message came through on the family phone from Edward via Kik, saying he hoped she was okay and that he'd left her at the gas station because she was too drunk. That didn't match what people at the bonfire saw. She hadn't seemed that intoxicated. When morning came on April 4th, her mom realized Ashley wasn't there and checked the phone, seeing that message. Her sister Brandy started calling Edward's number over and over. He didn't answer at first, but when he called back, he changed his story and said he'd dropped her at the mobile home park instead. That switch made them even more worried. Brandy and their mom went out walking the road near there, checking ditches in case she'd fallen or gotten hit by a car. They didn't find anything, but Brandy had this strong feeling something was wrong. As the day went on, with no word from Ashley, they talked to friends and started spreading the word. She had kids at home and wouldn't just disappear like that. By evening, they called dispatch to report her missing, explaining the date, the messages, and how this wasn't like her. With the missing persons report filed and those early red flags waving, the Dorchester County Sheriff's Office didn't waste any time kicking the investigation into gear. Detective Sergeant Andy Martin got assigned to the case on April 7th, just a few days after Ashley's family sounded the alarm. He started right where most probes do, with the people closest to her. Talking to her sister Brandy Chance gave him the basics: the shared family phone that Ashley left behind, the odd kick message from Edward at 3:29 a.m., claiming he'd ditched her at the gas station for being too drunk, and how that story morphed when they called him. Brandy laid it out clear. "I just knew something wasn't right. Sister intuition. Call it what you want." Martin noted how out of character this was for Ashley. She was a mom who always checked in, no history of vanishing or ignoring her kids. The family had no enemies they could think of, no recent fights beyond everyday stuff, and her relationships seemed straightforward, mostly focused on her children and casual dating after her loss. From there, Martin looped in friends and neighbors to build a fuller picture. Folks in the Somerville community described Ashley as sweet and photogenic, someone who lit up at family events like her cousin's wedding. No one reported seeing anything suspicious around her home that night. No strange cars lingering beyond Edward's Sonata. No arguments overheard. But a few mentioned her vulnerability lately, how grief had her making quicker decisions, like jumping into this meetup after a spat with another guy. One friend recalled, she was depressed, making poor decisions and things like that because of it. Neighbors joined early searches, combing the neighborhood ditches and woods, but turned up empty. The police encouraged tips, putting up flyers and leaning on social media shares, but initial calls didn't yield much beyond concern from her circle. Next up was Edward himself. Martin reached out, and Edward agreed to come in for an interview on April 8th at 6 p.m. He seemed cooperative at first, walking detectives through his version, picking her up, the bonfire, her getting intoxicated, the gas station stop, the argument about a stolen phone, and leaving her near the mobile home park. He even pointed out that shoe print on his car's front right quarter panel, saying she'd kicked it in anger. But Martin spotted something off about the mark. It was small at the bottom, wider at the top, like it came from someone on their back, kicking upward. As he later put it, "The only way you're going to get this impression on that car is that she had been laying on her back." It was that moment that I believed that something violent had occurred. Edward also claimed he was unemployed due to an ankle injury, which raised Martin's antennae. Why lie about something basic? To verify Edward's story, investigators hit the ground running on those key locations. They pulled surveillance from the Sunoco gas station, confirming the timeline. The Sonata pulling in at 12:04 a.m., Ashley heading inside looking steady, no signs of distress, and them leaving at 12:12 a.m. That footage was gold. It locked in the last sighting and showed she wasn't stumbling drunk like Edward suggested. Then they checked the mobile home park area. A nearby garage had cameras facing the road and intersection where Edward said he'd dropped her. After getting access from the owner, they reviewed the tapes. No vehicle matching the Sonata showed up during the window he described. That hole poked right through his account. Why say he was there if the cameras said otherwise? Digging deeper into witnesses, the team circled back to the bonfire crowd. Edward's brother's girlfriend, who knew the family for years, filled in details. Ashley arrived around 9:30 p.m., seemed friendly, and not overly intoxicated. "I've worked in the medical field, and she didn't seem super intoxicated," she said. Ashley wanted to stay longer, but Edward pushed to leave, grabbing her beers for the road. Others at the gathering echoed that family-oriented vibe, no drama, Ashley enjoying herself. No one saw her acting aggressive or wasted. This clashed hard with Edward's narrative of her being too drunk to handle. Colleagues of Edward's came into play too, though indirectly at first. A tip from his ex-girlfriend revealed he wasn't unemployed. He worked at cobble flooring with access to company vans. When Martin confronted him at the site, Edward fumbled, saying he'd just started days ago. His boss corrected that. "Edward has worked for me for the past 8 months." Why hide the job? Martin wondered. What is it about their job that they don't want me to know? That lead opened the floodgates. Investigators learned Edward had a take-home Ford Econoline van. His boss mentioned Edward was heading there to remove something from it. Suspicious timing. Martin secured the van before Edward could touch it and started processing. Opening the doors revealed red stains on walls, ceiling, and items inside. They pulled everything out, testing for presumptive blood. A dented polyurethane can, missing its handle with substance dripping down, lit up positive. Deep purple-blue reaction indicating blood. They collected DNA standards from Ashley's family, toothbrush, hairbrush, and sent samples to the lab. 4 days later, results confirmed a match to Ashley. The amount and pattern implied she was alive when placed in the van, not dead from the Sonata incident, as blood spatter showed repetitive force. Meanwhile, the Sonata itself needed checking. Talking to Edward's mother led them to its location in North Charleston. They seized it for the crime lab, examining for more traces. No immediate blood visible like in the van, but the shoe print tied back. They probed Edward's background, no major priors, but texts showed him juggling messages to his girlfriend about daily plans while setting up with Ashley, hinting at low morals. Cell phone records added fuel. On April 4th, from 6:44 a.m. to 7:12 a.m., Edward's phone pinged in Harleyville, north of his area, not in his usual patterns. Later pings placed him back near work, dropping the van. This out-of-place trip raised brows. What was he doing there? Searches expanded to nearby spots, like a reservoir by Edward's apartment complex, teeming with alligators. Worried about disposal, they called in the Department of Natural Resources. Boats scanned the water. A pilot flew over for signs of remains or clothing. Nothing was found. As the web of evidence tightened around Edward Bonilla, with blood matches, cell pings, and witness contradictions painting a damning picture, authorities moved to take him into custody before he could slip away. On April 15, 2015, after a meeting where detectives decided his repeated deceptions warranted action, Bonilla was arrested on charges of obstruction of justice. He had lied about his employment, the drop-off location, and other key details, creating enough grounds to hold him while the probe continued. When officers arrived at his apartment complex, they caught him in the act of dragging a suitcase down the sidewalk toward a rental SUV, suggesting he was preparing to flee the area. This timing only fueled suspicions that he knew the net was closing in. Bonilla was taken into custody without incident, and the arrest marked a turning point, shifting the case from a disappearance to one with a clear suspect in hand. To understand the man at the center of this, let's look at Edward Bonilla's background. Born and raised in the local area, he attended middle and high school in Dorchester County, where classmates remembered him as unremarkable, someone who blended in without drawing much attention. He had a brother, Anthony, and the family was described as close, often gathering for casual events like the bonfire that night. Bonilla had been in a relationship with a girlfriend for some time, but text records showed he was actively communicating with Ashley while making plans with his partner, including discussions about meals and intimacy later that evening. This painted a picture of someone leading a double life with little regard for commitments. Professionally, he had been employed at cobble flooring for 8 months, handling installation work and driving company vans, despite telling police he was out of work due to an ankle injury. He had minimal prior brushes with law enforcement, no serious record that flagged him as a threat, but those who knew him later reflected on his demeanor toward women. One investigator noted, From my understanding of Mr. Bonilla, the way he presented himself is that he had disregard for females in general, disrespect for women, and so, as a result of that, it was easy for him to take advantage of women. This trait, combined with his actions that night, suggested a pattern of opportunism rather than premeditation. During his initial post-arrest questioning, Bonilla stuck largely to the narrative he'd given before: the casual meetup, the bonfire, the gas station stop, and the argument leading to him leaving Ashley near the mobile home park. He reiterated details about her agitation over the alleged stolen phone and her kicking the car, but detectives pressed on the inconsistencies, like the camera footage showing no Sonata in that area. Bonilla didn't waver much at first, maintaining it was a simple fallout from her behavior. However, as interrogations progressed over the following weeks, with evidence like the blood in the van presented, his responses grew more evasive. He didn't confess outright during these sessions, but the pressure mounted. By early May, the case evolved further. On May 5, 2015, based on the forensic matches and circumstantial ties, Bonilla's charges were upgraded to murder in connection with Ashley's death. The motive wasn't explicitly stated as premeditated. Instead, it appeared rooted in a spontaneous escalation, perhaps an argument turning physical, driven by his reported disregard for women and a need to control the situation. Investigators theorized it stemmed from her accusations or resistance, leading to restraint and harm, followed by a panicked cover-up to avoid consequences. No clear financial or personal grudge emerged. It seemed more like a date gone horribly wrong, amplified by his choices to conceal rather than seek help. 3 days later, on May 8, 2015, Bonilla met with his attorney in a pivotal consultation. During this privileged discussion, he finally disclosed the location where he'd hidden Ashley's body, a remote wooded area off Browntown Road near Harleyville, the same spot his cell phone had pinged weeks earlier. This revelation came amid growing pressure, perhaps realizing the evidence was insurmountable. Authorities acted swiftly, launching a search the next day. On May 9, 2015, after a thorough search of a remote area of land accessible only by a driveway and trail, surrounded by farmland, search teams, including volunteer canine units, discovered Ashley's remains. Upon exhumation, her body was found naked, except for a red bra partially wrapped around her neck, with a black piece of clothing nearby, and her eyeglasses matching family photos. Black electrical tape was looped around her right wrist and neck several times, indicating restraint. The autopsy confirmed homicide by violence, with scalp discolorations consistent with blunt force trauma from repeated blows. She had been there about 5 weeks, face down in the mud, in a spot so isolated it explained the delay in discovery. Bonilla's post-arrest claims during further questioning evolved slightly, hinting at an accidental restraint during the altercation, but he avoided full accountability. As the pieces fell into place, attention turned to preparing for what came next in the legal process. The trial commenced on August 8, 2016, in a Dorchester County courtroom, lasting 4 days until August 11th. Prosecutors built their argument around a timeline of deception and physical evidence, asserting that Bonilla's actions that night escalated into a deliberate act that ended Ashley's life. They presented surveillance footage from the gas station showing her composed and alert, contradicting his claims of extreme intoxication. Phone records and cell tower pings placed him in remote areas like Harleyville shortly after her disappearance, aligning with where her remains were later found. Blood spatter experts testified about the patterns in the work van, indicating repeated forceful impacts consistent with the autopsy's findings of blunt force trauma to the head. The presence of cyclobenzaprine in her system, a muscle relaxant she had no known reason to take, suggested she may have been impaired against her will. The prosecution highlighted Bonilla's shifting stories, from leaving her at the gas station to the mobile home park, and his lies about employment, painting him as someone who methodically covered his tracks, even attempting to flee before arrest. They argued this wasn't a mishap, but a calculated response to an altercation he initiated or prolonged. The defense, on the other hand, portrayed the events as a tragic accident stemming from a heated misunderstanding. Bonilla took the stand, appearing nervous as he described Ashley becoming belligerent after the gas station stop, accusing him of theft and exiting the car. He claimed he accidentally backed over her while trying to leave, then restrained her in what he called a bear hug, or possibly a chokehold, to prevent further aggression, only realizing too late that she had stopped breathing. He admitted to panicking, placing her in the Sonata's trunk, temporarily leaving her on a frontage road, and later using the work van to transport and bury her in a shallow grave with a board as a makeshift tool. The defense emphasized that Bonilla had no prior serious criminal history and suggested the blood evidence could align with an unintended struggle rather than premeditated harm. They requested the jury consider lesser charges, like involuntary manslaughter, framing it as a momentary loss of control without intent to cause death. After deliberations, the jury returned a guilty verdict on the murder charge on August 11, 2016. The judge, describing the handling and disposal of the body as particularly harsh, sentenced Bonilla to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Bonilla appealed the conviction in 2019, arguing issues with evidence admission and trial conduct, but the South Carolina Court of Appeals upheld the decision, affirming the life sentence.